A little on planting theory and best practice. You always want to, as a rule of thumb, go around the field on the right side. All your controls are on the right side. It naturally flows your line of sight to the right side of the cab. You'll use your left marker when you go around the first time, just to give you a reference point. Helps you when you're backing into the corner for your second round. It's what your screen should look like. Each of your individual 24 row units are planting in the black, keeping up with the target population. You are painting the light blue block behind the planter. You have the dark blue line like a kite string flowing right from the center of the planter. Your red dot right below adaptive curves is flashing, indicating it is recording. As you can notice, it's kind of a balancing game. You want to get as close to the respective sloughs as you can, but one time getting stuck takes care of any advantage you have of getting too close. So if you're going to err on the side of making sure you're far enough away that you don't get yourself stuck. When you're making turns, in particular like around sloughs in the corner of the field, you want to make them nice and gradual. Obviously turn as sharp as you need to if you're about to get stuck, but if you are just moving along the outside just good, you just want to make nice and easy movements of the steering wheel. This allows the adaptive curves to follow for the second round and give you a lot smoother ride and much easier combining, especially in corn. Anytime you're in terraced fields or you've got to work a contour or around any water holes where you're using adaptive curves, you just want to keep your steering as smooth and as small as you can possibly do. That allows the second pass to follow the first pass and keep things nice and neat and close together. You'll notice the left marker sticks out, of course, 30 feet beyond the end of the planter. Just want to be mindful of where that marker is at all times. You can see how close it's getting to that water hole, the slough. If it was to get a lot closer, you'd want to pick it up and keep it from running through the water. More importantly, anytime you're working near the edge of the field for fence lines, power line poles, make sure you pull her back up in time when you're working around the edge of a corner and tight spots. Just be mindful that to your left, when your marker's out, you've got to worry about 60 feet out. As stated earlier, you always want to go around the field on the right side. You'll go around the field one complete pass, and then of course you'll jump over 60 feet, and hopefully, if you remembered adaptive curves that's flashing red, you'll be able to follow your track the second time around. With the aid of your marker, kind of give you a reference when you're in tight curves around sloughs and such and contours. You'll go around the complete second pass, so you'll make one complete round all the way around the field, both times of course going counterclockwise. And then depending on the field and of course logistics and where the next field is and all things to take into consideration, got to get out of this slough here. We don't want to end up in the middle of it and not have a way out. Sometimes you got to just almost turn inside yourself. Just want to make sure you don't turn too sharp that you're going to stick mud up the seed tube on the end inside unit. You can turn pretty sharp, but you can't turn as sharp as the tractor will turn, or you'll make the inside, as you notice, it's almost stopped. You want to keep it from actually going in reverse. Can stop, but the second it starts moving in reverse, you're going to fill the seed tube with mud and dirt, and you're going to be out there on your hands and knees digging her out. So that's the thing to keep in mind. Like now we're coming into this tight corner here, a very, very acute angle in this corner. I want to turn as sharp as I dare without having that wheel turn inside itself. Obviously, if you're getting into a power line pull situation, you've got to stop and pick up and back up and get out of the way. But if you're talking just, not water, but just a light slough or the edge of a grassy field where there's no fence line, then it's not a big deal. Just stick it in just a little bit and get her pulled back out as soon as you can. You just want to make sure not to turn it inside itself while it's in the ground. Once you're raised, you can turn it inside itself all day long. Just don't jackknife it and stick the outside dual against the main frame tongue of the planter. You get to a little knob like this that's just barely through a wet spot that's real touch and go. You don't want to be going through it any more times than you have to. So you'll just finish everything you got to do on that side of the wet spot. That way you're not going through and packing the ground any more than you have to through the narrow area where things are kind of sticky and tacky. You'll leave it, of course, on adaptive curves. And there off to the left, you can see how the row units are just about turning to a stop there. You don't want to do it too much because, as you can see, it puts the seed right on top of the ground because you're just kind of smashing the furrow in a semicircle. Now, like this, we'll be able to cover with one pass, so just kind of drive straight down the middle and cover it up with a 160-foot pass. You want to set your planter down early enough. It doesn't hurt to stick her down about 8-12 rows before you need. It takes a little while for the frame to lower, and once lowered, the automatic shutoffs on the section control will not allow any planting to take place until the planter has actually traveled over virgin soil and it's ready to plant. Section control is very, very nice feature on these John Deere equipment. This is about as tight as you can turn. If you get to a true 90, you're going to end up putting that outside dual up against the frame of the planter. Anytime you're looking at a situation like this, you're going to have to stop, pull ahead, turn the wheel, of course, in this case to the right to open up the gap between the planter and the tractor. And after pulling ahead just a few feet, you can now continue to turn and prevent the jackknife. Being careful to watch where your outside wing is in relation to the fence or power line poles or sloughs. You'll notice the markers are, of course, up. There's no need to put markers down when you're going to be going through narrow areas. The marker will just tear the seed out 30 feet adjacent to the wing. And it's very hard on the markers to be on the ground in the lowered position while you're backing up and turning around. If you find yourself in a situation where the main transport wheels are starting to bulldoze and you're starting to catch in mud, it doesn't do any good to lift the planter up. It will only make the problem worse. Your best and only chance of making it through is to leave the planter in the ground, because the more weight you put on your transport wheels, the more they're going to dig in and start to bulldoze and cause you to only worsen your chance of getting stuck. Pretty much once you're stuck, you're stuck. There is no way of getting out other than getting assistance from another tractor. There's no way of rocking yourself free or turning the wheels. If you come to a complete stop and your wheels are turning and you're not moving, the faster you stop and let yourself just sit and eat your pride and just accept the fact that you're stuck, the better and the easier getting pulled out is going to be. If you end up spinning your wheels, if you try digging around, unhooking, any of that kind of stuff, you're only going to make the situation worse, and it's only going to take longer to get helping family farmers again. So please, if you ever find yourself stuck, the second the planter quits moving and the tractor's still in gear and you're just turning mud up on the lugs, stop. That is the only thing to do. Call for help, contact the farmer, contact your team leader, contact any neighbor who can get a tractor out to help you. We have tow ropes in the pickups, and just swallow your pride. It happens to every one of us out here. I've been stuck more times than I care to admit. Come to a wet spot like this, you need to start turning early enough because you do not want the tractor to get anywhere near that wet spot. Also, you can only turn so sharp because, again, we want to make sure that inside unit does not go backwards. Allow yourself plenty of room. So 60 feet. It's a lot of space. In a situation like this, when you're going around one wet spot or slough and you're coming into a next, as you can see, it's only 120 feet wide or so of dry land in between. You got to balance. You got to be able to get turned around. We don't want that inside row to turn backwards. So we've got to swing as wide, and we got to start turning way sooner than one thinks to keep that outside unit from making contact with the fence. We also want to make sure we keep our tractor from making contact with the muddy soil, or we could get ourselves stuck. In a case like this, you'll see the marker now is tearing into the soil where we've already planted. We want to raise it up so as to not to remove any of the seed from the furrow. As you start a field, pay attention to the last tillage direction. Like now we're going across the previous, we're perpendicular to the previous tillage pattern. Whenever you're going straight across at a 90-degree angle to the previous tillage pattern, if you start feeling yourself bouncing the seat, look back and you'll notice all your individual units bouncing. You want to prevent that. That leads to very uneven seed placement, knocks them off the meter plates, and it also causes irregular pattern as they fall down through the seed tube as they bounce from side to side. So you want to make sure as you're going across rough areas, just knock it down a little bit, and it's easiest, and while still in F1, just take your thumb and roll back on the speed selector, and this will just gently pull your speed back down as indicated on the command post LCD screen. So now we're at 4.2. General rule of thumb is you're going to run about 5 to 5.5, maybe 6 in a real smooth field. So as soon as you're back to where the ground is smooth again, just roll her forward and pay attention to your side post command and take a look at what it's indicating. Now here's an example of where we're going to be coming into the corner, and I want to watch out for that fence with my marker. So as soon as I get close, I'm going to pull my left marker off because I do not have 60 feet from the center of the tractor to the edge of the fence. So I want to pull my marker up plenty early to keep myself from coming into contact with the fence. Here I don't want to get too close, but I need to swing wide enough. Here's an example where we're just going to have to leave it. The only option would be to pick up here, which I may do, and back into the corner. It's really your only option for getting into a corner like that. We'll pick up. And then we'll back in. Now, if this was any bit wetter and the soil type was more where you sink down, this is some pretty firm soil for being almost moist on top. It's been a really wet spring. We have to go when it's almost not fit. It's just barely working. You would not want to stop, and you would not want to raise the planter up. You just have to forget this and let it go. Because as soon as you stop in really wet soil that doesn't have any kind of bottom to it, you're going to just sink away, and that'll be all she wrote. You'll be calling for a pull. So you can back in. Just be mindful when you're backing up. You can see you have a conveyor on here. That conveyor sticks past about 6-7 feet back beyond the edge of the units. So just because you got room to back up to the fence on the units doesn't mean your hopper on the bottom of your conveyor isn't getting slammed up against a fence post or a power line pole. So just keep in mind how far you back up. The other thing is it doesn't do any good to plant in the grass. Nothing's going to grow, and it's going to put the combine operator at risk of wrecking a snoot or wrecking an end of a flex head. So just keep in mind, you know, you want to plant to the edge. We want to do a professional service to the farmers, but sometimes going too close into the fence or into the back of a corner is going to do more damage to our equipment and to the next guy who's coming through, the family farmer's coming through and harvesting the crops. You kind of always want to keep in mind, whatever you're doing, that you're doing it to allow the next guy to come behind you, who's going to be the combine operator. So anytime you have too tight of a turn where he's going to have to back up, or like there where you're hugging the fence, that end row there isn't even going to grow. Nothing's going to grow there. So I'm just wasting his seed by putting that fence, putting the planter into the fence. You need to make sure you stay a little ways away, because it doesn't do any good to plant edge to edge if you're going to stick it into the fence. Like now we're done with the first pass. Make sure the marker's up, and we're going to ride over to our left about 60 feet. As soon as we get over to about 60 feet, we're going to look down on the screen. We're going to see our white line for adaptive curves. Once we're over it, with the steering on, we select resume. The tractor grabs the line. You can see it's automatic for steering. We're on our white line. And when we look out front, we can see where I put the marker down. You've got a straight path. It looks like we're on line. As soon as the tractor and the planter are straight, we'll drop the planter in the ground. And no need to put the marker down, because we're only going to go around the field 2 passes for 120 feet to allow us to turn around. So we don't want to put that furrow out there that we're going to have to bounce across. Now you can see in the 2630, we're following the white line, and our automatic for steering. All of our individual sensors look good. Now the main task is waiting for the nearest corner or really sharp curve, and really paying attention to wet holes. That's a thing that gets really tricky, especially at night or once one starts getting fatigued, is you're relying on the auto steer to take care of the driving, and you tend not to pay enough attention about how wet the field is and where you're going. This straight track or adaptive curves, it will take you right into the middle of a 40-foot lake if you're not paying attention. It has no way of knowing if there's a rock pile, a grove of trees, or a lake. So it is your full responsibility to make sure that you're paying attention to your surroundings, and you're not going out and driving into where you're going to get stuck or destroy equipment. Now here we're on adaptive curves. You can see our planter is right near the edge of the water. I'm going to start pulling it away. We're starting to sink plenty far. We're not doing any good planting that beans in the mud. So I'm going to take the wheel now, and since it started on the left, normally we always go around the wet holes and the field on the right, but since it made contact with the left, no need to pull the planter up and waste time out of the ground. Just follow it around on the left side, and this time you'll drop your right marker down to give you a reference point. Well, you've got kind of a ballpark and a backup for doing your adaptive curves. As we're coming around to the end of this wet hole where it comes up against our second pass on the cross end, before we get into what we've already planted, I'll pick up the marker, keep it from tearing out the seed, and I'll keep the toolbar in the ground until the left end row makes contact to what's already been planted. I will pick the planter up out of the ground, and since it's closer to turn around and go back, I will turn right inside myself, being mindful of the fence to the left. Make sure I don't stick the left side in. Notice how the wings will turn backwards. When they're up in the air, that's fine. They're made to turn backwards. Don't worry about them. They'll dig in a little. They'll take care of themselves. They're made for it. Now we'll try to swing way wide. Now this is where your marker really comes in handy. It helps you line yourself up. Adaptive curves will take over, but it won't do it right away. So with that marker there, you can get yourself lined up to where adaptive curves, boom. Now I'm right on adaptive curves. That's why I highly recommend putting your marker down every time you go around, because now it picked it right up. You can see the white line. It's going to follow that all the way around as it turns on all the units with swath control or section control. Now it's steering itself. Again, Watch out to your left, make sure there's not another wet hole that you got to avoid. And since this is my second time around the slough, I'm not going to drop my left marker. I'm just going to keep them both folded in and let auto steer take me around. So like here where it's going to get too muddy, too close, I'm going to go ahead and take over and steer it out of there. It doesn't do any good putting it in the mud there. It's not going to grow. So here we're coming into a peninsula that we got to work. So as you can see, we've gone around it as in just a continual curve pattern prior. Now it's going to be too sharp. So what we're going to do is grab the wheel, take over from auto steer, and we're going to drive straight in. So we're going to straighten this off, make a cross end basically out of a cross end. So we pull until the front of the tractor is in line with the edge of the field and the planter has made contact with what was previously planted. It's just barely too wide to catch it in one pass, so we're going to have to work this cross end parallel to the original, and then we'll pull back out. We're trying to align again with the help of the mark. We align ourselves so we're as straight as possible, especially in corn. And now we're going to just straighten this off. Just drive straight into our first pass. Again, you'll watch on the hood of the tractor just kind of comes in line with where the grass or the slough starts, like about right there. You know you've covered completely. Just a rule of thumb. If you can see the last pass right over the front tires of your tractor, you know you got it all. We'll back up again. And this time, we'll be able to finish the rest of this peninsula in one pass. As we pulled out of that peninsula, as soon as we can get back to the auto steer, we want to do that. Sometimes it leaves a little bit of a gap just because of the physics involved with a piece of equipment that's 60 feet wide, but it's going to do a better job of staying on and reducing skip and overlap than the human eye can do. So the sooner you can get back to the auto steer, the better. Obviously, when you're working little peninsulas and you're working in areas that you can't, then you need to take over. Now, as you'll notice on the screen here, coming up, we've got a symbol of a really, really sharp curve. See how tight that curve is to the left? And then again, especially into that peninsula, it's really, really sharp. When you come to curves that are really, really sharp, you need to just kind of be ready to grab the wheel. And as soon as you feel the wheel start to jerk violently one way or the other, grab the wheel. If you grab and move the wheel, like I'll demonstrate here, it's getting to this sharp curve. I don't want it to grab the wheel. I'm going to be ready for it. Right there, the wheels really went violently to the left. I grab the wheel and I just smooth it out. Again, using my marker over the hood ornament to give me a reference so I can stay pretty accurate. Now here I'll drive straight in and corner this off. If you let the wheel do its thing here, it's going to try to turn you in a complete 180, and it'll wreck the planter if you let it do what it wants to do. So you need to be ready on the ends to grab the steering wheel and take control. Like here, I'm going to shoot for the center of this open virgin soil. Get my planter as straight as I can, in particular in corn. Drop it in just before the first opener gets to open soil. And now I'm just going to kind of angle towards my marker. Again, the marker being a great help here. So now I can just kind of start angling towards it. And as soon as I get to where I'm a little bit over, now I'm going to start to turn to try to make connection with this particular mark. Now I got to wait. Right now it's trying to get me on a different adaptive curve. So I have to steer. This is where the marker comes in real handy because it tells me I'm going to want to go to the left. I want to go to the right. So I'm just steering now with my aid of the marker until it gives me that white line. Boom, now I have the white line. Now I can steer over to it. I'm just hugging it a little too close there, the red indication. Now as soon as it gets close, I will let auto steer take over, and it'll pull me right back on and reduce my skip and my overlap. So that's a prime example of where the marker really helps you in curved and slewed fields. This curve here, we're going to see it's probably going to be too sharp. Yes, it is. So as soon as the tires start to move violently, I grab the wheel and I just smooth it out so it doesn't put too much torque on the frame of the planter. As soon as I'm back to where adaptive curves will take over, it's smooth curve or straight, I'll let the adaptive curves take over with auto steer. All right, this curve coming up here is going to be too sharp to the left. So I'm going to want to square it off, and I'm going to make a pigtail to the right. So I'm going to grab the wheel a little bit sooner than it would start jerking me. I'm going to turn it intentionally to the right, just slightly. I'm going to square it off. And now at the last minute, because I'm not up against the fence, I can pull it up out of the ground and turn inside myself. Now this only works if there's no water sitting there and there's no fence, because you are going to put the planter out into what hasn't been planted. So it only works in a wet hole situation where it's just kind of, it'll be okay, but not open water. Now we come back, again using the aid of the marker, try to get it squared off as best you can, and put her in the ground. Now with auto steer, I can, whoop, a little late, but get auto steer to engage again, and away you go. When you look across the toolbar, you just want to make sure that everything looks to be level. From wingtip to wingtip, and then from right behind the tractor on the tongue to the back of the planter. If you forget the trans lift, you're not going to be planting on the back of the machine. You will only be planting on the wings. If you forget the tongue lift, you're going to change the geometry of the individual row units, and they're not going to be planting properly, and there's not going to be good seed to soil contact. So it's very important that the trans lift and the tongue lift are all the way down in seeding operations. Obviously this toolbar flexes for contours and for variations in the landscape, but you should have a level toolbar on level ground. What you're witnessing here is a prime example of an operator failing to pay attention to a sharp curve and the angle, in particular going around sloughs or the edge of a field. As you see here, we're going to take a hard left turn, but we need to pull all the way into that peninsula in there. I failed to grab the steering wheel soon enough, so when this happens, you just need to stop, pick the unit up out of the ground, make sure it's fully raised, back up, just, 20, 30 feet, depending on how far the gap was made. Line yourself up with your marker, and then start pulling ahead, and the section control will take care of turning the units on after you drop hydraulic 1 in the ground. Now we'll just work ourselves straight into this peninsula, which is what I should have done in the first place, had I been paying attention to the sharp curve on my screen and grab the wheel in time. I'll pull right now until right there. We've just covered everything. Now we'll stop, make sure it's fully raised to make sure we don't push dirt up the seed tube. Now in this case here, I'm going to back hard to the right as you're sitting in the tractor seat. My goal is to line the back of those wheels right down the middle with that planter mark. So when I pull forward, it's going to be straight on as I take off to our left. So now I'm about straight with the line. I stop. Get everything straightened out, compensate just a little bit to pull the back end right under center. Now we're right under center. I will select auto steer and drop it into the ground. As long as the toolbar is fully lowered, before you cross into fresh soil you're going to be planting. Okay, this is a prime example where instead of going through that narrow area and packing up what doesn't need to be packed, let's finish up what's right behind us. This is just a little island unto itself now. So we're going to finish this island up before we move on to the greater field. That way we utilize our time and our fuel, and we minimize compaction the best we can. Since this is such a small island, I'm not even going to use straight track. I'm just going to go with adaptive curves. Whenever you're working an island like this, you want to make sure you're utilizing the longest pass. So in this case, we're going to be working along the slough now to our left. So we're going to go back along and utilize as much space as we have, as long a rows as we can get. That way we're not turning around, and we maximize our time in the ground and production. Once we get to the end where I cover completely, I'm going to take the wheel like now, and I'm going to turn to the right. And hopefully this next round will finish our island here. Here there's just a little piece left. It doesn't matter what track you're on, just physically verify out the window that you're covering, and the auto shut off on the section control will take care of the rest. Okay, as you'll notice, I'm trying to get myself squared back in. So I want to get as close to that white line as I can and as square as I can. So I want to wait till the auto steer. See how now I need to go to the left about 19 inches. So I don't want to engage auto steer until I'm down to less than a foot. Then it makes for nice smooth engagement. And now boom, the wheels hardly had to turn and they're engaged straight track, and we're going straight. We're planting nice and straight for the guy to harvest. As we square this corner off, I'm going to turn inside myself and make a pigtail. Now I want to watch that fence to my left. I need to watch that left wing and verify that the left wing is not going to make contact with the fence. So anytime you do a pigtail and you're on your second round doing cross ends, be very, very careful to not stick your wing into the fence. Okay, we're pulling to the end of an island like this. We'll stop once our wheels get right so we can just see the row over the top of the front wheels. We know we have full coverage on the back. Now in order to reduce compaction so we're not turning around and doing as least amount of damage compaction wise, we'll just back ourselves inside ourselves and pull right out. Any place those heavy tires, especially those mainframe tires, roll, you're going to have a big reduction in yield. If the right conditions exist, it'll probably grow, but it's not going to grow near as healthy as ground that has not been compacted. All right, this particular wet hole kind of came to a triangular end, so instead of making a real sharp turn, I'm just going to pull myself into a little point. So I just pulled straight, made a loop, and now I'm going to turn around and go to the right side, so I'm actually going to be using the left to put seed down. Now we're working this point again on this water hole. We want to try to have all of the stops and starts in a line, because we're going to be working this field east and west are somewhat perpendicular. So now if I drop it in about now we're going to have it all in a line. So when you come across on straight track later, it's going to be real easy to cover, and you're not going to have little skips to go back and get. So we've just completed our second pass around the field of cross ends. So we'll tie it up here, pull it until it's completely covered, and we'll pick up the planter and move again one to the left. Now let's stop and let's take a look at our map, and let's talk about what we're going to do to try to make the best use of our time and be productive. So this is your normal screen, and you can, if you want to see more of where you've been in your field, press the minus icon, and this will pull it out, and you can kind of get a pretty good idea what the field looks like. Now this is all at an angle because it's giving you a perspective of the field. If you want to see a flat on, so you can kind of really get a feel for whether it's longer this way or longer this way, go through your home screen. One of them should be the map option. If it's not, you can always go to the main menu, bottom right hand corner. Select GS3 for Green Star 3. A, mapping. Here's a view of a map. To give you a full size, full screen view, press this reverse button. Now it's a full size. Now this is way too close. We want to see a long ways out. Toggle through. This again gives you the angle, just like the corner box here. Tap again. This gives you the straight on, so you can really get a feel for whether the field is longer, one way or another. This particular field, this is north-south, this is east-west. So obviously the longest path of travel, barring any other water holes in here, is going to be east-west. So if I was to do this field, I would shoot an A plus heading of 90 degrees, or 270 would work. If a field is longer the opposite direction, then of course you select 180 or 0. If this field here, we definitely want to work this way. So what we want to do is, the driveway's back here. This is where we started. We just come out with our last pass, went all the way around, did the water holes, so on. Now we want to utilize our time and be efficient. So instead of just picking up and driving across the field all the way out to here to start going back and forth at a 90-degree heading and work our way out, we're just going to plant. So we're going to start right here and we're going to plant all the way around. That way we're planting the entire time. Once we reach the end here, then we're going to start working. So we'll work ourselves back and forth, east-west, all the way down, work around water holes as we come to them, not prior. All these we kind of touched. And this one here was real close to the road, but otherwise you just kind of work your way down as you go. And then when we end up, we'll end up working this one down to a point, and we'll come up here, work this one down to a point, and then we'll work ourselves all the way down here, and then all we have to do is drive right to the end, right to the driveway, and you're out. So you just kind of want to try to plan yourself so that you are always working yourself to the driveway, and you always want to have your toolbar in the ground. By working it all the way by adding a third cross end, you reduce your compaction and you utilize your bar in the ground. The thing to remember is anytime your planter is raised, you are not being productive. So as much as possible, you want to keep that toolbar in the ground planting. Now obviously you want to use your head, and sometimes, you know, pulling it up and turning around and squaring things off obviously makes sense. But as a rule of thumb, as long as you're planting and the toolbar's in the ground, you're serving the family farmer, and we're getting some production and have a sense of satisfaction of doing a professional job for the family farmers.